AI Rate Limiting Advanced plugin allows us to, control the rate of our requests to our API. But this one is specific for AI. So if you are used to dealing with the rate limiting plugin or with the rate limiting advanced plugin, this is an improvement of that. And before I continue talking about this plugin, let me just go with you through the documentation for it. If we go to the introduction, we will find that it explains that the AI Rate Limiting Advanced plugin provides rate limiting for the providers used by any AI plugins. And my question when I started reading this documentation was, wait a minute, we already have rate limiting plugins in the Kong API gateway. There are at least two of them that are very known. One is the rate limiting and the other one is the rate limiting advanced plugins. But there are more. There is one, service protection, which allows us to define rate limits to the services, and it is exclusive to services. Then we've got rate limiting, which allows to configure rate limiting for the consumer group, for the consumer, for routes, for services. And the same goes for the rate limiting advanced. Now, I have spoken a bit about the rate limiting plugins in an article, this one over here, where I discussed more details about other plugins that can potentially be used in the Kong gateway. And I explained that using the OSS version of Kong. So there I just used the local container and simply configured the plugins to figure out how to work with the rate limiting plugins. But the AI Rate Limiting Advanced is something different. This plugin is specific for AI, specific for our requests to our large language models. And there are multiple configurations that we can do with this. We can even connect this plugin to a Redis database. And there are advantages for that. In general lines, it means that we can, for example, make sure that the rate limiting is proportional to the different large language models that we may have configured in Kong Konnect or in our Kong Enterprise Edition. The purpose here is to understand how this plugin works, regardless of using the Redis database or not, because in this case, it is not mandatory. What is mandatory for this plugin to work is the AI proxy. And the AI proxy, we can configure it, as we have seen in this video, to connect to multiple different large language models. We have seen how to configure this with Gemini, and we have seen how to configure this with Mistral. And for Mistral, we did a special configuration. We went to the website, like over here, and we created an API. Now, I have already created another API for this example so that we don't have to go again through the configuration of Mistral. In this case, we can just go to the API here and just get one API key and then use that API key in our example. Another thing that it's important for us to even start considering the use of the AI Rate Limiting Advanced configuration plugin is the fact that we need to understand how many large language models we want to use in our services and routes. For example, we can configure the AI proxy plugin per route or per service. If we configure it per route, we will have a good advantage when we try to use the AI Rate Limiting configuration plugin. And the reason for that is that we can then configure, for example, two different routes with two different AI proxy plugins. And in the service, on the service level, we can then configure the AI Rate Limiting Advanced plugin, which the one we are seeing today, and make sure that it will affect the two different routes. Because with that plugin, we can configure rate limiting both for one large language model and another, and how many we want to configure, because we give that in as an array. So keep that in mind. If we have AI proxy configured in multiple routes, we can configure them all at the same time if they belong to one single service, because that is what we saw just now in the configuration of the AI Rate Limiting Advanced plugin, where it says that we can use this on a service, route, consumer, and consumer group level. And that is just one example of how can we use the configuration of this plugin to affect multiple different routes. But to understand this better, let's first have a look at the configuration and what it provides and what are we going to configure in our example. If we go to the configuration reference of the AI Rate Limiting Advanced configuration plugin, we can see that we've got all of these different nodes that we configure, but important and mandatory is that we configure the LLM providers node. The LLM providers node is where we say to this plugin which one of the LLM providers is it going to affect, which one of the routes that are being forwarded by the AI proxy plugin are going to be affected by this rate limiting. Now, if we configure this by service or by route, we will affect either the service and all the routes bound to that service, or the route that we want to configure. And the important bit here, and it's important that we focus exactly on what this actually does, is we've got 3 different properties per configuration that we do for one particular large language model. The first one is the window size. This means the size of a window in seconds. If we think about it, that means that we are going to affect the rate that we are going to make the requests for a certain window. And you probably noticed that I am talking just about rate, not talking about the number of requests. And that is because the AI rate limiting plugin does not configure per request. It configures per token size and per cost. And what this means is that a token is a word, for example. A letter is also part of the account for how much it costs to, for example, ask a question to the LLM model. This is something that depends on the LLM model itself, and it depends on how we configure it. And so it is not a number that we can control directly. It's a number that we can know if we know exactly how our large language model works, but we probably can do better if we make the requests and make some experiments in our application to figure out what requests have what size. Because we want, of course, to make sure that we limit the requests that we are sending to the LLM. We also need to give in the name of our LLM model. So here's where we specify OpenAI, Azure, or Anthropic, or Cohere, or Mistral, Llama 2, Bedrock, Gemini, Hugging Face, or Request Prompt. These are different large language model types that we can use from different brands. And so we've got window size, name, but probably the one that is more interesting here is the limit. What do we mean by limit? As I mentioned before, this is about costs. This is about the number of tokens, the token size, the number of letters, and it is about also the different large language models. Important thing here is that we know what kind of limit do we want to give for a certain window. Let's say, for example, an arbitrary number, 60. If we say that we can only send a 60 cost request in a window size of 30 seconds, then that means that in that 30 second sized window, I can only send up to 60. And that means that I can send 2, 3, 4, 5 requests just as long as the sum of all the costs of those requests does not exceed 60. If I send one request that exceeds 60 in those 30 seconds, then that means the amount of time that I have to wait will be accounted for and will be calculated in function of how many of those tokens I have exceeded in terms of the limit. But this is something we will see in practice when we run our example. Important here also to understand is that when we are using the AI rate limiting advanced plugin, we are also making sure that we are using another functionality that it gives, which is these headers that will provide us information on what is the status of the request to our LLM model and what is the status of the rate. For example, we can see here that they are talking about the rate limiting reset, the rate limit retry after. We are talking about the rate limit for Azure. In this case, we are seeing here 30. And when we are establishing the rate limiting, when we are establishing the window size will be reflected over here. We will see here, for example, if we say 30, that will be 30 seconds. But if we say, for example, 1 minute, that means 60 seconds. If we configure 60 there in the total amount of seconds, we will see here minute instead of 30. And so on. There's other kind of headers that we receive back that will inform us of the current state of the rate limit for one particular large language model. And this could be one LLM in one route, or 2 or 3 or 4 routes of the same type in one service. But of course, our example is much more simpler than that. What I have already prepared for us is in Kong Konnect. I already have 2 different plugins configured for our route and service. So let's see how this all is configured together. If we go here, for example, to the gateway service, we see already that I have 1 service configured with this host and port. This is not necessary in terms of the definition of the host and port, but we do need to define something here so that this works, because this will be proxied by the AI proxy, and therefore the URL here takes no effect. When we go here to our routes, we see that this is just a simple route, and as we have seen in this video over here, the previous video to this one, we see that this route is simply a route to Mistral. So here we are just going to use this path so that we can access Mistral. But the routes are accessible now because I have these plugins configured. And that is what we are going to see. If we go to the example project, Kong test drives, I already have a file there called readme AI rate limiting advanced. In this file, I have already an automated configuration system that we can use to give it our environment variables. We can then call these scripts safely from our command line to make sure that we get these plugins configured. And so let me show you that. So the first one is the AI proxy, and for the AI proxy I have configured here Mistral. All of these variables is something that we need to give into the command line. If you want to know more about how this works, I've explained that already in this video over here. Make sure to watch that one. It will be all in the description. Make sure also to follow the chapters in the description so that you know exactly which video is this one and where to find it. So this one is just a simple AI proxy plugin you have seen before. We've got here the provider, Mistral. We also use the Mistral format of OpenAPI. We say that the upstream URL is chat completions, and we are simply using this as a chatbot. We are using our LLM model simply as a chatbot. And then we enter the configuration of the topic of this video, which is the configuration for the AI rate limiting advanced plugin. And here we have the complete configuration where we are specifying that any configuration for this particular route, which we could have configured here services, but because we are just showing how it works, we will configure it only for one route. This route will have this plugin attached to it, which means that it will have this LLM provider configuration where the Mistral LLM model that we are using with our AI proxy plugin will be limited to 10, which is the weight of the question or the cost of the question that we are making, which is the sum of the tokens and the letters and the calculation that needs to give it a cost, and the window size of 2 minutes, 120 seconds. So if we now go to our command line from IntelliJ, because this is already configured locally, I already have here everything configured, and I can show you. I already have here at the top, from this point onwards, I've got here the container running, and I can show it to you also. If I do docker ps, we'll find that I have here a Kong gateway running locally as a data plane node for our Kong Konnect website. So now this is connected to Kong Konnect, and we are configuring this container from that point to here. Having said that, we can now test our configuration, and let's just ask one question that will take a long input, which is, what was the first popular breakthrough of Dire Straits, which led them to become one of the most known bands in the last decades? So this is a very long question, and it will certainly cost more than 10, because I've got here one word, I've got more than 10 words, and I've got words that are longer than 2 or 3 or 4 characters, and I've got different words, and I've got also punctuations. I've got all of this stuff. So this will have a cost. Which cost do you think that this question will have? I know it by heart because I've done this example before, but if I run this now, how much do you think this will cost? And do you think okay, it was too quick. I was going to ask if you think that we were going to get a question anyways. Well, it does answer. It says Dire Straits' first popular breakthrough was their single Sultans of Swing. from their self-titled debut album released in 1978. So that's a long time ago. But this is just one answer. I'm not sure if this is correct or not. I believe it is. But the important thing that we want to have a look at here is how are the headers that we want to have a look at behaving. So we see that we've got an XAI rate limit 120 Mistral of 10. This is true because this is how big our requests are. The rate limit remaining says here 10. 10, that is how much the cost can be. We can see here the rate limit by size query cost. Our whole query took 290. So if you said anything less than this, you were wrong. If you said anything above this, you were wrong. If you said something around this, you were probably correct in your estimation of how big this question would be. Now, I don't know how this is calculated because this also depends on Mistral, but effectively we have here a cost for this question. So we can now get an idea of how costly are these questions. But we also see other things. We see that nothing seems to be affected by this request, because this is the state not of how we leave the rate limiting, but this is how we entered rate limiting. That means that if we make a follow-up question, like for example, who are dire straits? Now if we send this, it says the AI token rate limit exceeded 4 providers Mistral. But now here comes the fun part. We can have a look at the different headers that Kong has given back to us. And now we can see that the XAI rate limit remaining 120 is 0. We don't have any more credits, let's call it that way, to send these requests. We have here that the reset will be at 171. This means that we need to wait 171 seconds still before we can continue. Remember, we made a question that is 290 in cost, and our limit is 10. Now, we wouldn't wait 120 seconds. We would have to wait much more than that because we've wasted so many tokens at one point where we were able to make a question. So now, rate limiting is in effect, and we cannot make any other question until this deadline expires, until 171 seconds go by. There are differences between these two. The retry after 120 Mistral means that we can make a retry after 171 seconds. If we say a retry after, it means that we can make another retry after 171 seconds, but this means the combination of all of the different rate limiting that we have configured in our gateway. So this one is the same because we only have one in effect right now, and so that means that they will always match each other, and it seems like a repetition of one or the other, but they are not really that. And then finally we've got here the rate limit 120 Mistral 10. That is the current limit we have for cost, and this one is the reset, again 171. And then now I think those 171 seconds have gone by already, and if we make the question once again, we should now be getting a response, which is taking a while. Maybe I should have used this plugin, the AI Cache plugin. But anyways, it says now that it tells the story. It seems like you might be confused between two different things. Dire Straits, which is a British rock band, and dire straits, which is a phrase meaning a serious or desperate situation. It is true. One or the other, it doesn't matter. We made the question, and the AI model is now trying to figure out a way to give us a response, and this is a very, very correct response because one is the band and the other one is the popular saying. And now, what is our limitation? Well, if we go here further above, we will see that our question now, the total cost of this question is 262. So this means that the question is smaller, but the cost is still 262. That means we have already reached the border. We are already way above 10. So that means if we make a question now, for example, who is Brian May? And if we run it, we should now be still under the limit. And now it says the AI token rate limit exceeded 4 providers Mistral. Again, we have exceeded the rate limitation, and that means that we get too many requests, and we should be getting now the state of our rate limiting. And that means that the state is, again, we don't have any more credits, we need to wait 197 seconds still, and only then we will be able to make another question to our AI model. Alright everyone, so this was my short presentation about the AI rate limiting configuration advanced plugin. This is a plugin that has multiple functionalities, not just this. This is a bit of a crash course into how to use it. There will be more videos coming in with a lot more detail about it. Make sure to stay tuned to this channel and make sure to subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss out on following videos explaining this. Now, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give us a like, make sure to subscribe to the channel. As I mentioned before, make sure to leave your comment. It's very important for you to give a comment to this video. I will answer questions that you put in there. And don't forget to activate that notification bell so that you are up to date with the videos that I post over here. Thank you so much for watching the video, and until the next one, be sure to stay tech, keep programming, be kind, and have a good one. Bye. As a short disclaimer, I'd like to mention that I'm not associated or affiliated with any of the brands eventually shown, displayed, or mentioned in this video.